Good afternoon, gentlemen. We're live.
Good afternoon, Noah. Good afternoon, Gil Martinez, my old
Hi.
friend.
How you guys doing? How you guys doing? Thank you for having me on.
So I was telling Noah, my co-host Noah, that I was telling him about Gil Martinez. At first, I want to set the stage for having Gil on because unless you really know mixed martial arts and boxing, unless you've been around a long time, you probably don't know Gil. Gil's one of those old school trainers, world class trainer that lays low. He's humble. You don't know him, but maybe you should know him because the guy's got a lot of great stories in him. He's not out there promoting himself, but he's lived this. And Gil, one of the things, the last time you and I did a Facebook Live a couple years ago there in Las Vegas, and we got like 2,300 views in like a couple weeks, which I was like, dang, like Gil's, you got a nice little loyal following that, you might not have the biggest following, but you got a loyal following. So I was like, damn, these people, they come and they want to hear what Gil has to say. So to tell everybody a little bit about you, Gil might be best known, some people, he did a lot of stuff with Extreme Couture. He's worked with Randy Couture. He's worked with Vitor Belfort. He's worked with Ray Cepho, who's a good friend of mine too. He's worked with Great Maynard, Mike Pyle, Ryan Bader, Mike Chandler, and many others. You've worked with a lot of junior Olympians in boxing. You've worked with Golden Gloves champions. I love what you do with the youth. I love what you do with the youth in Las Vegas. That you take these kids off the streets. They might not have a lot of options, and you teach them the work ethic. You teach them your code. And so, Gil, one of the things that intrigues me about you is I came from inner city Baltimore, and I came from streets where I was one of the only white kids on those streets. And it was not an easy life. And so I know it when I see it. I can tell another guy, I was telling Noah this, I can tell another guy that has like, okay, this guy's not a joke. This guy has lived in rough sections. This guy would be respected. Whatever zip code he went into, he would be respected in any room, in any environment. And so that's one thing that's always intrigued me about you, because you are a humble guy. You are a respectful guy. But at the same time, my sense of you has always been, well, if you cross the line with that guy, he's going to really let you know it in a big way. He's not joking. Gil has his way of doing things, very old school. So Gil, it's a pleasure to have you. How do we say in Spanish? You were saying muchas gracias, agradezco, tú eres contigo. I don't know. I'm messing it up. How do you say it's a pleasure to be with you in Spanish?
Es un placer estar con ustedes.
All right, awesome. Tell us about growing up. Were you born in Las Vegas?
No. So I was born in Mexico City.
Okay.
My parents brought us, me and my brother, at a very young age. I was 5.5 when we were brought up here. And we grew up in LA. My parents moved up to Lake Tahoe for a few years, and by the time I was 14, I left and I went back to LA on my own. So I started my family pretty young. I was 14.5 when I had my first kid.
No kidding. So you had to grow up fast. What do you remember? What stands out to you about your childhood? What do you remember growing up, Gil Martinez? What was that like?
My family was very poor. We didn't have much. Everything that we had pretty much hand-me-downs from older cousins, people that we just knew. It was pretty rough. My home life wasn't the best either. So we had to learn at a really, really young age how to fend for ourselves.
You had to learn that. Why? The streets were tough. You grew up in these areas where there's not a lot of money and there's a lot of violence and there's gangs. What did you grow up? What did you see around you in the neighborhood you grew up in?
I lived in the projects in Pacoima, which is San Fernando Valley. I don't know many other places that are rough or rougher than there. You know, any area where there's projects is going to be a pretty rough area. So even going to school, if you had something nice, you'd have a pretty good chance of somebody trying to take it from you. Um, you know, crossing through the wrong area. You know, you had to know where you were and which way you could and which way you couldn't walk through. So you know, a lot of, and you see a lot of drug dealing and prostitution, and then just gangbangers left and right. Um, Helicopter over your apartment pretty much nightly with the big spotlights looking for people. Gunshots here and there, almost every other night. So it was pretty rough.
Yeah, it's interesting because especially the old school guys like you and me, when you look at what got us in, like me, Gil, when I was 12, one of the biggest shifts in my life happened. So before the age of 12, I was still living in the rough neighborhoods. We were changing schools. We were changing zip codes all the time. Dad was never around. Mom was hardly around. But I was still a happy-go-lucky kid. They used to call me Smiley. And so I was still a happy-go-lucky kid. I was not a fighter. I was the furthest thing from a fighter. I was that kid that was scared of a fight. I was that kid that was a little bit goofy, a little bit quirky. I was writing songs, you know, busting on people, giving guys nicknames, but I was the furthest thing from a fighter. And when I was 12, my brother and I were walking home from school. We were at a new school, and this kid decided to follow us. It was me and my brother. My brother's a year younger. It's two of us and one of him, and we weren't fighters. So this kid, you know, 2-on-1, we should have been like, dude, you better shut up or we're going to do whatever. But we weren't fighters, right? This kid was a meaner kid, bully kid, stocky kid. Kid keeps following us. Kid winds up getting in a fight with my brother. I didn't say anything. I didn't do anything. And so after that event, that event kind of haunted me because I started thinking like, man, you know, it's going to be like that, right? There's going to be more of this, and this has happened before, and I didn't even defend my brother. I didn't say anything. I didn't stand up, and that haunted me. And then I made a decision within it. It probably took me 6-7 months, but I made a decision. Like, I don't know if I'm gonna win fights, but if somebody makes trouble with me, if they make trouble with a family member, with a friend, then it's on. And I'm going to make it at the very least. I'm going to put up such a fight that they're going to think twice before they do it again. And so it's interesting to see how people like you, people like me, a lot of the fighters, where these things happen and we say, man, I got to get tougher. Otherwise I'm going to be a sitting duck. I'm going to get myself in a lot of trouble. And that's how somebody like you gets into boxing, because you're realizing, I got to man up. I got to take care of myself. I got to be able to walk these streets. I got to be able to survive. And in this case, you're a very good boxer. I mean, I saw your story. I didn't know this about you until I did more research with the car. You know, you were 67-5 as an amateur boxer. Very good, promising amateur boxer. And then you had the car accident. Tell us about the car accident. Tell us about your amateur boxing. And then you had a car accident.
So my older cousins were boxing, and you know, I was getting in trouble even as a kid. And you know, a lot of the times I didn't want to fight. But like you said, like if you let people pick on you and you don't defend yourself, it's going to be worse. So when, you know, people at school, bullies, and they would try and take stuff from me or just bully me around, you know, I knew I had to defend myself. So obviously I would get in trouble. My parents would get called, and I would get in trouble at home for fight. And one of my cousins said, you know, I'm going to start taking you to the gym since you like to fight. And you know, I remember walking into the gym, and the first time I started hitting the bag, it just felt right. It felt good. And I just fell in love with it. And you know, me and my brother, my cousins, a lot of friends, we had a really good team. We had a great coach. May he rest in peace. he taught us a lot. He taught us well, and the most the thing that stands out the most about him is the work ethic that he instilled in us. And so I was pretty successful as an amateur. Had 72 amateur fights, 67-5. And like I said, I had my first kid very early. So I stopped boxing for a few years. I had left my home, moved out back to LA, and now with a kid, I had to work. I was going to school, trying to finish school. So I was only training on the weekends, and it just got harder and harder. So eventually, I quit boxing, and I'll never forget. I was working at a place called Price Club, and I was pulling in cards, and I see a guy walking right past me with a white satin jacket, and it said 10 Goose and Boxing in the back. And so I ran up to him, and we were talking, and I told him I used to box, and I started going back to the gym. I try to make that a little bit more important, make a little bit more time for it. My kids, I already had 2 kids by then, and they were a little bit older, so it was a little bit easier for me to make more time for myself. So I started going back to the gym, and one day after a sparring session, my trainer said, "You know what, Gil? Let's forget about this amateur stuff, man. You're ready for pro." That was probably to that day the happiest day of my life. Hearing those words, man, I can't even explain how happy that made me. And so I said, "Man, let's do this. Let's do this." And I had a lot of good friends of mine that I grew up with, and so I wanted to go back home and tell everybody, "Hey guys, here's the date for my pro debut, and I want all you guys there." Back then we didn't have cell phones and stuff like that, so I wanted to be up there. And so I told my coach that I want to go back home for a week, and he was like, "What do you mean? You are fighting soon. You have to be ready. Your training camp starts now." And I told him, "No, no, no. Listen, I'm going to train there every day, and I'm not going to miss a beat." And unfortunately, the second night I was out with my friends, 10 o'clock came, and I told them, "Hey guys, drop me off, take me home." On the way home, we were at a stoplight getting ready to make a left, and 2 kids that were racing, they ran the light and they T-boned us, and I was in the passenger. I ended up in a coma for 9 days. 3 of my friends in the back, they passed away, and that was it for me. I couldn't go back to it more after that. And I tell a lot of the kids that I trained, don't waste time, because one of the worst things to live with is regret. And I live with it every day.
Yeah, it's interesting. As I was doing the research and as I was writing notes for this conversation, the phrase "in the blink of an eye" came to me, and just how fragile life is. It's like you could be sitting pretty one moment, like you said, your coach told you, surprised you, "Hey, Gil, you're going pro." And you heard those words and you're on cloud 9. You said the happiest words, you've heard. And you've got the vision that everything you want is there. You go and tell everybody, and then a couple of days later you're in a car. Some kids are racing, they run a light, and then now you're clinging to life, and some other people in the car are dead. And it's like you got this guy like you who's super strong, who's super tough, who's a very promising fighter, and now you're fighting for your life. And I was going to ask you about that. Like, is that the greatest adversity you've ever had when you wake up from that coma? And how did you get the step? I mean, your career is over, but how how did you get back some of your confidence, some of your drive, some of your purpose? How did you rebuild after hitting the bottom there, waking up from a coma?
Well, I was very fortunate because I did come back and I woke up. A lot of people don't, but so I was very fortunate. And in the beginning, um, it was very frustrating because I didn't have very many memories, and people would tell me about me boxing, or they would show me pictures, and it was surreal to see that person that was me doing stuff, boxing, and with pictures. And back then they had the camcorders, so they had those big uh tapes. um and once I got better and I was able to go home and be around my kids and my family, my coach came. He called me one day and he's like, hey, some of the guys here at the gym, they want to say hi to you. So he's like, it'd be nice if you came by the gym. So I went to the gym, and it was one of the best things I could have done, because the second I stepped back into that gym, this is going to sound kind of weird, but as soon as I walked into the gym, the smell of the gym, the noise, the speed bags going, hearing that jump rope going, the bell, uh, hearing the bags being punched, everything. It was an indescribable feeling in me, and so many things like just flashed through my you know eyes, and I, like, a lot of memories started coming back. And so uh, I hung out with everybody there, talking to everybody. Maybe like about a week later, I wanted to come back and I wanted to train again, and I had to get cleared. um I went back, and they were like, no, you have too much scar tissue, we can't clear you. After that, the next few years were the hardest. I felt depressed, and I started hanging around with the wrong crowd because I was mad at the world. I was mad at everybody, and hanging out with the wrong crowd and getting drunk and getting into bar fights. Uh, and I got up to about 260 pounds because I was doing nothing, drinking, eating bar food, whatever. Until one day I seen some pictures of myself, and I was like, man, that's me. I was fat, huge, and I said, man, I can't keep doing this to myself. And now I know that I was feeling sorry for myself at that point.
Mm-hmm.
And I had 3 kids by then, and I knew I had to push forward. I had to get better. I had to live life and be there for my kids. So I started going back to the gym just to lose weight. Um, and that's kind of how I started helping people, because I was watching some guys sparring and they were getting beat up, and so I would tell them, hey, you're doing this wrong, or you keep getting hit with this. And but those next 3 years, those were, I think, the roughest part of it.
The 3 years went after you woke up from the coma.
Right. Yeah. When I found out
So,
that my dream
yeah.
was gone.
Yeah, it's interesting, and I can relate to this because of my life story, where when you have something that, I mean, other than your kids and your significant other, your wife, whatever, other than that, other than family, you have the thing you love the most in the world, and it's taken from you in an instant. And so your whole identity, I mean, it's devastating. I had that happen with my collegiate wrestling career with a very serious injury, and it's absolutely devastating because it doesn't just take away something you love, it takes away a big part of your identity, like the thing that you wanted to wrap your identity around. And that can be devastating. And so you went through the 3 years where you're hanging out with the wrong crowd, you're drinking too much, you get very overweight, and then you go back. This is one of the things that Noah and I were talking about before the podcast. The idea, you strike me as an example of like fighting saved you. And what I mean in fighting saved you is that you imagine what you would be without boxing, without fighting. You could very easily be one of those guys in those tough, rough zip codes who doesn't make it out, who winds up spending a long time in a prison cell, or gets himself, whatever. I mean, there's a lot of, it's very easy to find trouble in those zip codes, even when you're not looking for it, even when you're trying to be a good guy. It's very easy for stuff to just go down. And you seem like a guy to me. It's like, wow, fighting saved this guy. And then I think when I come into your gym, when I've been in there and I've seen you in your environment, I'm like, it's like you're trying to do the same thing for these kids now, because that's really where you shine, Gil. I know you've worked with some really good fighters, some champions in MMA and in boxing, but you really do seem in your element and shine when you're coaching the kids there. And I just see, like, the power of boxing, the power of that martial art, because it's worked for you, and now you're going back and sharing it for a lot of these kids. Talk about, I guess, what is your why when it comes to coaching these kids?
One of the reasons is because I see myself in a lot of these kids. Boxing, it's a poor man's sport. Most of the kids come from broken homes, single parent homes, or, just homes that are struggling financially. And that was me growing up with not having much, always, wanting more than what we had.
Mm-hmm.
And I also know that boxing did save my life. Being in the gym, the discipline that it teaches you, and it teaches you also, no matter how hard life gets, if you're a fighter, you can make it, and you will win, or at least you can make it through those hard times.
Yeah.
Like you were saying, in those area codes, in those cities and towns, you're gonna find trouble even if you're not looking for it. I had a younger brother that's a year younger than me, and he was never able to make it out of there. So he spent time in the 3 worst prisons in California: Folsom, Tehachapi, and San Quentin. And it was 7, 8, years in each place. He could just never pull himself away from that situation. Once you become institutionalized, it's very hard. And once you do get out, it's even harder to try and get back, because even if you want to, people don't give you that opportunity because you are an ex-felon. So for my brother, it was very hard to pull himself out of there. He was actually murdered about 2 months ago. He would have been 51. And
Wait, what happened? What happened to him 2 months ago, Gil? I'm sorry, you broke up there. What happened to him?
He was murdered. They shot him to death. And that's what happens a lot to people that can't pull themselves out of there. So even though I have my kids early, I always say that my kids saved my life. And boxing saved my life, because without those 2 things, I would have been right next to my brother. I would have been doing the same things he did. But me having a kid early, I always told myself, I have to be responsible for this child, and I cannot be one of those dads that is gone and not be responsible. And so, and boxing was the same. You know, boxing taught me discipline and hard work and never give up. And if you work hard enough at something, you can make it. And unfortunately for my brother, even though he boxed, but the streets got to him. The streets were a little bit harder for him to walk away from. And so, like I said, unfortunately, we lost him about 2 months ago.
What was your brother's name?
Anthony.
I have a brother, Anthony, too. It's interesting. We're sorry to hear about the passing of your brother, Gil. I didn't. That's very tragic. I'm really sorry to hear that.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
The interesting dynamic. So, if you're the guy, you're taking boxing, you get good at boxing. When you get good at boxing and you're in those zip codes, the word gets around that dude has hands. So people in your neighborhood, after a while, after you've been training for a while, word gets around, damn, you don't really want to mess with him when it comes to throwing hands because he's going to be a problem, right? But on the other hand, if you're too proud, right? If you're the guy in those tough neighborhoods and you're too proud and you're peacocking, even if you can fight, you become a mark because people want to test that. People want to knock that guy down to size. So it's an interesting balance that has to happen a lot of times where, yes, you're respected and maybe people don't want a problem. But if you carry yourself too proud, too big, then it invites problems. What was your relationship like? Because you got some people that, okay, you can throw hands. You're really good at that. Maybe there's not many people that will want to throw hands, but they don't play hands. They play something else. Did a lot of the toughest people and even the gangsters, did they have a respect for you and they kind of left you alone? What was that relationship like? Your dynamic.
So I have a story for you. So like I said, I've been on my own since I was 14. So by the time I was about 16, I was working, going to school, and I lived in an apartment building, and I lived upstairs. We had moved in there, maybe living there maybe 2 or 3 months. So one night I come home, and I have to walk into a stairwell and to go upstairs. So I open the door. I start going up the first flight of stairs, and at the second flight of stairs, there's about maybe 5 or 6 guys in the stairwell just hanging out, smoking, getting high. So I'm walking, and I make it past them. No, nothing happens. The next night, I come home from work. It's late, probably about 12, 1 o'clock. So I open the door. I'm making my way up. This time, when they get up, instead of allowing me to pass by, one of them stands in front of me, and he says to me, "Where you from, Ese?" And me, I wasn't a gangbanger. I said, "Where am I from?" And they're like, "Yeah, where you from?" And I said, "Oh, well, I'm from Tahoe." And they looked at each other, and and they looked kind of confused. And one of them goes, "Tahoe," and I said, "Yeah, up north." And so they're like, "Oh, so you're a norteño?" And I said, "No." And they're like, "Yeah, you are." And I said, "No, I'm not." So one of them gets up and takes his shirt off, and I'm like, "Oh man, we're gonna have to get down here." And sure enough, we start fighting, and I put hands on him, and I knock him down. He got up again. I knocked him down again. Another one jumps in, and now we're rolling down the stairs. We end up outside. We're fighting, and I knock him out. Those guys ended up becoming some of my best friends after that. they knew like I didn't want to become part of them. I didn't want to be part of a gang, but there was just a mutual respect. They respected me for not wanting to, and I respected them for whatever they wanted to do. And so we became friends. And I wouldn't hang out with them very much, but we hung out on occasion. But they always knew, like, I'm not trying to be part of a gang. I have things I want to do. And but you know, it happens a lot in areas like that.
Yeah, it does happen because it's easy for people. You see people say now, like, you're the average of the five people you spend the most time around, right? And so, but when you're in these tough neighborhoods and these tough zip codes, if you're not cool, like you can't look at the gangbangers or the violent people in your neighborhood and be like, I hate all of you. You're all punks, whatever. You're gonna have problems. You have to learn to coexist, and inevitably you're probably going to wind up being friends with some of them, even if you don't do what they do, because you need to keep the peace. You don't want to make enemies of people that will put a bullet in somebody and not lose an ounce of sleep and then won't think twice. Like, it's not a good idea to be treating them like, dude, you're the scourge of the earth. You're terrible. Like that sounds good when you live in a middle class neighborhood or you live in a rich neighborhood. It sounds really good to be like, hey, the gangsters are bad, terrible, whatever, and I want to hate them. When you have to go and live in that neighborhood and turn the key and you have to walk those streets, you need to coexist. And the only way you can coexist in those neighborhoods is to show respect. You have to show respect to everyone, including the gangster, including the drug enforcer guy. That was my experience. Like, if you're gonna disrespect them, you're gonna have big problems. Inevitably, you're gonna have people that you're cool with there, or else you're gonna have problems. I mean, that's been my experience. Like, it sounds good when people sit at their computers and talk about, like, us, them, and forget them. But it's like, okay, go live in the neighborhoods where they're your neighbor.
Yeah, it's
You're
not.
gonna want to, yeah, you're gonna want to coexist with that dude somehow. At least some little understanding. So because of your fighting ability, you made some friends, whatever. And tell me about uh, your code, Gil, because when you're working with athletes, you're working with professionals, you've got a lot of young fighters you work with. What is the Gil Martinez code? Like, your way of, it's a very old school code. What is your way of doing things?
I think for me, the way I think is work hard. Don't try and reinvent the wheel. Uh, just put in the work, and you are going to be good at whatever you try or whatever you are wanting to do, as long as you are willing to put in that work. I see a lot of people that are very talented, but they don't like to work. And I'm a true and firm believer that hard work will beat talent every day.
Have you ever had athletes that didn't work? How do you handle an athlete? Okay, you're in the gym, you see an athlete, you think they've got a lot of talent, a lot of potential, but they're not putting the work in. What would you take? You're going to take that athlete aside, and what are you going to say to them?
You know, Unfortunately, it happens a lot. Sometimes the guys that are up here are just naturally talented. Their talent kind of they do really good against other people, so they kind of figure they don't have to work as hard. And unfortunately, sometimes they learn the hard way that that's not the case. Even though you're talented, you still have to put in that work. So with people like that, I try and drill into them and make them understand that it doesn't matter how good you are. When your gas tank is empty, you're done, and you can't do anymore, and you're gonna end up getting beat up and if it's a fight, you're going to lose. And so I try and make them understand that their work ethic is the thing that they're going to be able to fall back on and rely on when it gets hard and tough, because you're going to end up fighting people that are just as skilled as you. And whoever runs out of gas first, that's the person that's going to lose.
What does it mean to you? I mean, you're Mexican, so I've been following boxing for a long time, going back to Julio Cesar Chavez fighting Meldrick Taylor on ABC, Wide World Sports, and the Mexican that especially when it comes to boxing and throwing hands and phone booth fighting and toe to toe, and the Mexicans are just, they got the gas tanks, they can take the punishment, they have the courage, the bravado. Is some of this, you said you love boxing from the moment you hit that bag. Do you think that some of it's in the blood? What is it that's in the Mexican blood, particularly when it comes to boxing, that, culturally or in the blood? What does it mean to you, I guess, to be Mexican and love fighting? What's going on there? How did you, is it in the blood? Is it in the culture? What is it that creates so many guerreros?
I think that it's just anybody. It doesn't really matter what your race is or what matters is what you've gone through. When you are born and raised in poverty and you suffer, it's a lot easier to go into a boxing gym or an MMA gym and take that punishment. It's a lot easier because that is your way out. That is one of the ways that you can pull yourself out of poverty and live better and have better things. Other people, regardless of what they are, if you already have, it makes it harder for you to go ahead and go back to that gym after you got beat up, because you have other avenues. And the anger that you have growing up, looking at other people that, maybe they have nice pair of shoes, or now they have a really nice car and they dress really nice. There's a little bit of jealousy in there, and it creates a little bit of anger. And I think your where you come from is what makes you a fighter. When you have to fight, like we were talking about earlier, going to school. I remember one time I got a little cheap watch for, I forget if it was my birthday or Christmas or something, but I got a cheap little watch. I was like 8. I'm walking to school, and me and my brother walking to school, and we get jumped by like 5, 6 guys because they wanted my watch. You learn at a really young age, you gotta defend yourself, and I think that that's part of it. Mexico is a country where a lot of people come from poverty, and this is their way out. So they are willing to take that punishment and willing to work hard, and they are willing to break their back for you, as long as they can see a glimpse of light at the end of that tunnel.
Let's talk about the psychological side of the sport of fighting. I mean, we see people, a lot of times a fighter is one person in the gym, and then we see fighters that are a different person when they get to the cage or they get to the ring. Everybody handles it differently. Some people, they don't look that great in the gym environment. They turn it up when the lights are on and they're better. Some people shrink. How do you train your fighters to deal with the mental side so that the fighter is able to perform at a high level and not be overcome with fear and doubt and worry, whatever, on fight night? What do you do to prepare your fighters mentally?
A lot of it depends on the fighter. Some fighters just have it, that switch just clicks and they're good. Some you need to give them a little bit of encouragement or push them a little bit. One thing that I really like and it was a documentary I seen, and it was about Mike Tyson. And I remember him talking about, even when he was at his prime, that walkout, when you get in your hands wrapped, you start feeling them nerves, because now you realize this is real. This is about to happen. On the way to the ring, I forget his exact words, but he was saying like he's nervous, he's scared on the way there. But as soon as he stepped into that ring, he told himself that this is my world. I'm a king in this, and it just clicks. You know, he turned from being this person to an absolute animal. And you know, some fighters have it like that. Some you have to make them and remind them why they're there. They have to think about why they're doing this, and if they want to succeed, this is the place to show. And now you got to perform, and you got to do it, and it can't be tomorrow. It's got to be done now, today, right there.
Who's the mentally toughest fighter you've ever worked with?
Man, there's a lot of them. I'm gonna say mentally the strongest. I'm gonna say Mike Chandler is definitely one of the strongest minded fighters that I've ever worked.
I've heard other people I greatly respect. I was surprised his name has come up with some other people that, like, yeah, Mike Chandler. A lot of people sleep on it. What is it about Chandler and mentally that you love?
So I remember when he came to Couture's. He had very little experience. Obviously, a very talented and great wrestler, all American, but wrestling and fighting completely different. And I started working with him, and maybe 2 months in, he doesn't have a fight yet. We're just working. And I remember one training session. I asked him after we were finished. I asked him, "Hey, what are you doing this weekend?" And he said, "Oh, I'm gonna hang out with my girlfriend. I haven't seen her in like 4 months. She's coming out here, and I'm just gonna hang out with her." And I said, "Oh, okay, okay." And he's like, "Why?" And I said, "Well, I was gonna ask you if you wanted to come in and work with some of the boxers, my boxers, on just some drills back and forth." He's like, "Yeah, I'll come in." And I said, No, man. We don't have anything, scheduled. You haven't seen your girl in a long time. Go ahead and spend time with her." His answer to me told me a lot about him. He said, "Coach, I'm more interested in being a good fighter than a good boyfriend." And for a young kid, I believe he was in his early 20s. For a young kid, a good-looking kid in Las Vegas, where he could be out, because this town, if you don't have this up here, this town will chew you up and spit you out. That showed me a lot about him. And after that, I went on MMA Junkie, and we were talking, and towards the end, they started asking me about everybody. So about Vitor Belfort, Gray Maynard, Randy, everybody that I was training, Martin Campman, Mike Pyle. And they asked me, "Do you have anybody that we should keep an eye out on?" And I said, "Yes." I said, "Listen, there's a kid named Michael Chandler. He's about to enter the Bellator tournament." And I told him, I said, "Watch, he's going to win this, and he's going to become a world champion." And the guys on the show, they looked at each other and kind of like, "Who? It's Mike Chandler." And I told him, I said, "Keep an eye on this kid." Every training session, I could see the desire, the he self-motivated. And he was one of the few people that would call me randomly. Hey, coach, I'm practicing this. How do I do this? Or am I doing this right? Or during the fight, hey, coach, did you see what happened here? How did he do this? You could tell from the very beginning that he was one of the guys that wanted to learn, and he wanted to be a good fighter. And his work ethic, definitely up there with the very best. And I believe that's why he became the Bellator champion. And he beat a guy, Eddie Alvarez, that at the time they fought, Eddie hadn't lost in like, I don't know, like 8-10 years. He had one loss, and it was back, like, I don't even remember how many years back, and I think it was like Pride or something. But he beat a very, very tough Eddie Alvarez.
Yeah, and he's got 2 wins over Benson Henderson, he's got wins over Eddie Alvarez, who's a former UFC champion. He's got 2 wins over Benson Henderson, who's a former UFC champion as well. So, and now he's in the UFC. A lot of people are really excited, but his name has come up. People I really respect just rave about his work ethic, his desire, his mental toughness. What do you see, Gil? You've been around. I mean, my gosh, it seems like I remember I used to train with your son Marco at Drysdale's. Great kid. How's Marco doing, by the way? I mean, I normally would ask you this off air, but how's he doing? I know that there was an accident, and how is he doing? I just want to ask that.
Thank you for asking. He's doing a little bit better. It's one of those situations where, sometimes he's up, and then sometimes he kind of realizes the situation that he's in, and his morale just kind of drops. So I try and keep him on an upbeat and staying positive. Unfortunately, he had 3rd-degree burns, both legs from his knees down. He's had I believe 3 or 4 surgeries now. He will be having a few more. We still don't know how many more. He's in a wheelchair, but Marco, and he doesn't quit, and he's not a quitter. He's been trying to walk, even though he can't, but he's got a walker that he tries to walk, and because even though they told him that there's a possibility that he will not walk, he's telling me, I'm going to do it again, Dad. I'm going to walk, and I believe it.
Yeah, you send him my regards. We're friends on Facebook, and he was such a talented kid, strong as hell for his size. I remember reminds me of my son, really skinny kid, but he's a reminder that like some of these skinny kids is like strong and athletic, and just he was hard to hold on to. You just like you think you got him pinned down, and then you don't have him pinned down. It's like, damn, yeah, he's got that fighting spirit, which will serve him well for what he's doing now. Noah, really quick before we keep going, you've been sitting back patiently, our co-host, guy who makes the trains go and does great research. Noah, what's on your mind? You want to throw a question here with Gil?
Oh, thank you. I've been actually in the background working on a couple of our social media, just trying to get the link out to everyone. But I'm listening closely. So pardon me if I look. If you see me looking around, I don't miss a thing. I don't miss a thing right here. But I want to ask Gil. I'm familiar with Mexican culture, and I wanted to Frank asked about the mental aspect of boxing. How has your relationship with your, I want to say spirituality or your religion, how has that adjusted with the times of your life?
I'm sorry, say again, you broke up.
Oh, I'm so sorry. I know that religion and spirituality is huge in Mexican culture, and especially when you're talking about in the fight sports, in the hurt business. How has your relationship with spirituality and religion, how has that evolved over time?
You know, it's one of those things that you always it's good to have something that you believe in, something that's greater than yourself, so that when you need that strength, you can fall back onto and and you know look for that guide and that strength. So I think in this and in any sport, it's that's why you see a lot of guys thinking, whatever they believe in after fights, because it's one of those things that when things are tough, and you can kind of lean back on that and get a little bit of strength and to get you through what you're dealing with. So it's very important, especially in our culture. Very, very big.
Yeah, it's interesting. It reminds me of the good question, Noah. It reminds me of the in the military, they would say that, there's that old saying, there's no atheists in foxholes, right? People would be atheists. They don't believe in God. But if when it gets really thick and real, everybody, your natural inclination, if the plane's going down, if you're in the foxhole, if you're about to go into a cage, because this is the thing, Gil, in all my years around the fight game, I don't know many atheists. I'm trying to think, like, I know people that don't go to church, but I don't know. I don't know many people when I'm thinking of the high level. I don't know many elite combat sports athletes that are just straight atheists. Everybody is like, by the time you make that walk, by the time it's go time, there's something higher that you almost feel, or you're thinking, hey, whatever there is that's higher, can you be on my side, or can you at least make it so I don't get hurt? So some people, there's people out there praying for their opponent just like themselves. They're praying, hey, Lord, I know people that refuse to pray for victory. They'll just pray, hey, God, please let me do my best and let none of us get seriously injured. Like, just weird, that's the kind of stuff that goes through your head. It's a very interesting, because when and I told people when I worked at Ultimate Fighting Championship, my favorite thing was not the actual fights. As much as I love back and forth, great fights and great knockouts and this and that, my favorite thing in the world was being backstage, the half hour, the 15 minutes, the 10 minutes before somebody had to make the walk. That was my to see somebody, to see the transformation, to see, like you said, they're getting the hands wrapped, to see them go from nervous to calm, to, like you said with Tyson, to evolve, where you go from really nervous, why am I doing this, to this is my mat, this is my cage, this is my ring, this is my time, and I've worked too hard for this, and nobody's denying me. And it's just, you get to see behind the scenes too. You can almost feel it in the air. It's so thick, it's so palpable, it's so much testosterone that you're just like, damn, it's aliveness. It's just this big theater of aliveness that I think is even better than because, like you said, once they get out there, a pro, once by the time Buffer says, it's time, and then the ref says hook them up or whatever, it's like, by the time that happens, the elite guys are not nervous at this point. Like you said, the nerves it's gone now. It's they're right into what they do. So tell me, this was interesting, because your amateur background made me think of Emmanuel Stewart, because you had a really good amateur background. 67.5 is a great record. Emmanuel Stewart, a lot of people don't know, but he had like 250, 270 amateur fights, and he was a really good amateur fighter. And like you, never got to fight pro. Never. This guy who was a really good amateur. So you reminded me, I'm like, damn, this is kind of an Emmanuel Stewart thing, where he had life happen. He had to make a living, and he realized, I could make more money coaching guys right now than to go and make hardly nothing. And he had to work. So he had to get out there and do it, wind up coaching 40 plus world champions. he said something to me before he died, a year or two before he died. I got to interview him, and I said to him, Emmanuel, what was the first time I ever got to interview him? That was a big deal, right? That guy. That guy's a legend, and so
Yeah.
old school, just like you. And I said, Emmanuel, you worked with 40+ world champions. You have the famous Crunk Gym. You've seen fighting for your whole life. What was the common trait you saw in all the great fighters you worked with? What was the common trait you saw? And he paused, and he said, a big ego. He said they all had a big ego. They all had a lot of pride. Even the ones that were quiet, they all wanted to be the best. They had a chip on their shoulder. And you might know, Gil, I did a TEDx talk about that very thing. Let me talk to you about, I'll pose the same question to you. What is the most common trait you see in the best fighters you work with?
Pretty much the same thing. It's it's their personality. The self-belief that they are the best. You can't beat me. It doesn't matter who you are. I will spar with anybody. I will fight anybody, and I will beat everybody that you put in front of me. That self-confidence, sometimes a little bit arrogant, but those are the guys that. And then also the biggest thing for me is their work ethic. The guys that are willing to come in and put that work in. One of the guys that I had the pleasure of working with that also showed me that work ethic was Randy Couture. He was already older than most of the guys. I mean, he fought everybody that he fought. I remember he fought Brandon Vera, and if I'm correct, Brandon Vera was 27. Randy was 47. And Randy ended up beating him. Yeah. But Randy was one of those guys that he didn't need a lot of people around him. He just knew that his work was going to get him that victory. Sometimes they'd be 3 or 4 of us in the gym, cold. That gym is huge, so it took forever to warm up. And sometimes it'd just be a few of us. He didn't need much. He is one of those guys that just grinded and pushed himself. And no matter how much I pushed him, he always responded. Those guys, you see it in them. You see that those guys are going to give you everything. In my opinion, they give you everything. One of the reasons is because they are afraid to lose. They don't want to ever taste that. They don't want to ever hear that other person's name being called, or the other person's hand being raised. They want to win, and they're going to do everything they can to make sure that happens.
Yeah, it's interesting because a lot of people, now obviously you and I want to put an asterisk beside this. You're not saying, and I'm not saying, that if some guy just has a big ego and he talks big, I mean, you got to put the work in, and you got to balance it. Like we've said, these guys who have great self-belief, like Chandler, Dominic Cruz, Randy Couture, they have great self-belief. They're also very humble in many respects. They're nice guys, so they're not walking around the gym like this is my. But when it matters, when the bell is rung, in between the lines, like, because I was imagining, and this is the thing with the big ego. People are like, well, this my favorite athlete is quiet and he looks humble, so therefore he has no ego. And I'm like, well, you can't get in his brain. All you have to do with any elite athlete is just tell them that so-and-so is better than them and should make more money than them. I don't care how nice, how humble. Just go up to Michael Chandler, Randy Couture, Floyd Mayweather, Muhammad Ali, anyone, any elite in any sport, soccer, go up to Messi, go up to Ronaldo and say, hey, you know, so-and-so is better than you and they should make more money than you. And they're going to be the champion this year. Go up to any serious competitor. I don't care how nice, how humble, how smiley, how many charitable events they go up to them and tell them, you're not worth the money. These athletes are worth more money. And so-and-so is better than you. It will eat at them. They'll be like, well, you tell them to sign a contract. We'll see, you know, because when we say big ego, we're not saying be a jerk, tell everybody how great you are. A lot of the guys that have, like, even a Miguel Cotto, whom Emmanuel Stewart worked with, if you watch Miguel Cotto at work and you listen to him in front of microphones, there's no ego. He's very respectful of everybody. He's not talking about himself in the first person. But when you look and the bell rings, when you see the bell ring, you're like, this guy would rather take years off of his life than lose to the other guy. And that is a mental tick that a lot of people don't have. It's like, wait, because if you don't have that, right? If you're okay, if you're just okay with losing, if you're just okay with somebody being better than you, if you're just okay with him making twice the money, you ain't gonna go through fire when it gets thick, and when you're gonna ring the bell and take the easy way out. The only thing that would make somebody keep going is, look, they said he was better than me. They said he was whatever. If it gets dark, when it gets thick, I'm going to show all of you here today that you underestimated me, that you don't know what I'm about, that you don't know what's in me. And there is that thing to show, like Randy, the self-belief in Randy is so exceptional. Number one, as you said, because of his age, his advanced age, so much harder to win at that level. But secondly, because Randy was that guy that, like, he lost 10, 11, 12 fights, and he got knocked out a number of times. And usually once people start getting knocked out, once they have 10, 11, 12 losses, their self-belief is never the same, right? It damages the self-belief. This dude was so mentally resilient that if you knocked him out, he came back the next fight like he'd never been knocked out, you know, no memory of it, which a lot of people do. And then it's like everybody in the world is counting him out, right? He was always counted out. He's too old. He's too this. Yeah. And he could bounce back from losses like nobody I've ever seen. That guy was like, just when you counted him out and he had 1 loss, 2 losses, now he's getting knocked out, he would show up at the fight like nothing ever, like, it's my day. I'm going to beat this Tim Sylvia. He came off the couch to beat Tim Sylvia, right? Yeah. Had an 8-week. Tell us about the Tim Sylvia camp. Had like a 6-week camp and comes off out of retirement. Shocked the world. I mean, he's that guy.
Yeah, that's why I love his nickname, man. Captain America. You know, Randy's incredible, man. Incredible. Like you said, their ego, it doesn't mean that they're, you know, showing off or anything. It's just in them, their self-belief. You know, there was a lot of times where, you know, like you said, Randy could have just said, hey, I'm going to give up. I'm hanging him up because I just lost. But his will and his drive, man, it's second to not very many people.
Tell me a little bit about the state of fighting today, Gil. When you look, you've seen it evolve over the last 15, 20 years. You've been in boxing. What do you like about where MMA and boxing are today? What do you not like as much, and what would you change about it?
You know, one of the things back in the day, I'll give you an example. Arturo Gatti, man, they don't make him like that anymore. You know, the wars he had with Mickey Ward, I mean, that trilogy, I don't know, I can't think of many other fights that had that type of you know, that battle, that will to win. I mean, both of them, they beat the hell out of each other, you know, over 3 fights. They don't, you don't see fighters like that anymore, which in a way it's good because yes, we're not meant to get hit. We're not made to get hit. So it's good for the fighter that, they're a little bit more mobile and not taking as much punishment. But it's very exciting. It's very exciting to see that type of fight. I think both in boxing and especially in MMA though now, before it was just you have a really good stand-up striker, you have a very good wrestler, or you have a very good jiu-jitsu practitioner. Now, with all these kids coming from very young and putting it all together since a young age, and you're starting to see, how much better the level of their fight, the mentality, the skill, it's just improved so much. One of the guys that I just it was a really good fight. The baby assassin,
the kid who beat the kid who beat Winklejohn, beat Winklejohn and Greg Nelson. I mean, not Greg Nelson.
He just fought the Brazilian champion. His name is Brandon, I think. But anyway, they call him the baby assassin. It's a Mexican kid. He just fought the Brazilian champ, and they gave it a draw. That kid, man, so much heart, man. I thought he was going to get knocked out in the first round, and he went the 5 rounds and had the champion in trouble a few times. He ended up getting an eye poke, which the momentum was, in my opinion, the momentum was shifting in his favor. And then the eye poke comes, and it changed it. It slowed down the momentum. And then he got a low blow. And again, the momentum at that time was kind of moving towards him. And it kind of, even things out again. That kid, man, he's going to be special.
What's his name, Gil?
I can't think his name, but his nickname is the Baby Assassin.
Okay.
Hey guys, can I jump in real quick?
Yeah.
The UFC's just announced that for UFC 257 that it's all been worked out with Dan, the Hangman Hooker, versus your guy, Mental Strong, Mike Chandler.
Oh wow! When is that?
That's UFC 257 on the 23rd, 20th or 23rd, that Saturday, in Abu Dhabi.
That Poirier versus McGregor. That's Poirier McGregor undercard.
Yeah, so I wanted to, if I could interject, Frank, if I could ask you about that from a stylistic matchup. Can you give me your thoughts on, Hooker versus Chandler? How do you see that going with them in the midst?
Me personally, I think I'm going to be a little biased here because I worked with Mike. I think Mike wins. I think his determination and his drive, it's hard to beat him. Yes, he's gotten caught a few times and he gets careless a little bit, but if Mike shows up, it's very hard to beat him.
He sets that torrid pace for people who haven't seen Mike Chandler fight. I mean, first of all, he's a fire hydrant. I mean, he just physically is just a specimen. And then the thing he has too is not only is he super mentally tough and a hard worker, but he comes after you every second of the fight, which is extremely brave. I mean, we see a lot of great champions who are brave, but they don't dare come after you every second. They're more strategic. They may be a counter fighter. Sometimes they may fight a guy. They may dance more. Just, we even saw that with Israel Adesanya, who's awesome, who's a great champion. I love him. But we saw him play the safe route when he fought Yoel Romero, when he fought, more of a points fight. Michael Chandler, you know what you're getting when that bell starts. He's coming after you every second. Kind of like, I mean, again, for you with your Mexican background, Julio Cesar Chavez, Marco Antonio Barrera, Eric Morales, The old Marco Antonio Barrera. He did adapt. He adapted his style later. He had to for longevity. But Eric Morales, these guys, or Salvador Sanchez, these guys are on you from the moment it starts. They're going to be right there. You're going to know exactly what they're going to do, and they're going to dare you to stop it. And Chandler now too. What's been amazing, Gil over time is he can generate a lot of power on those punches. It's not perfect technique, but his technique has improved a lot, and he's got a lot of power on his shots too, which makes him really. He's not just a wrestler, grind you out. But the thing I like about him, it reminds me, this was my mentality as a wrestler. When my body, when I could will my body to do what I wanted it to do, my mentality was that my opponent may be better than me technically, but I'm going to set such a torrid pace. You talk about work ethic. I'm going to be such a hard worker. I'm going to be such a cardio machine. I'm going to be so durable that this guy is going to start to get tired, and his gas tank is going to be tested like never before, and he's going to start to drop his level. All that technique, all that beautiful technique is great when you got the gas tank. When somebody sets a pace like the Diaz brothers or Michael Chandler or Dan Gable, and they set that pace, or Julio Cesar Chavez, it wasn't always that Julio Cesar Chavez was the best boxer. It wasn't that. He was the best cardio machine. He was the most durable. He would impose his will on you. He would suck you into that pace, and it didn't matter if your boxing technique was better than Julio Cesar Chavez. That's the kind of guy that I see in Michael Chandler. It doesn't matter if your skill set is better than Michael Chandler's. It might be, but he's going to drag you into deep waters where your heart rate is up at a 160, at a 170. He's going to drag your heart rate at a level that it probably hasn't been dragged in training. As hard as you're training, it's probably not as high of the heart rate as Michael Chandler's going to do to you, right? Like you think you can simulate that. Remember they used to say this about like Floyd Mayweather in his prime, or even Demetrius Johnson. Like you have these guys that are so fast that you can't get a training partner that can match their speed, right? There's some athletes like you're going to train for Demetrius Johnson's speed or Floyd in his prime. It's like it's hard to simulate that because it's like there ain't that many guys on the planet that throw hands that quick. So you almost have to be ready on fight night. Be like, well, you better really learn to judge his speed on fight night because you can't simulate it in training. And the same thing with Michael Chandler. You can do all the stuff you want. You think you can simulate that heart rate and that level, but it's very hard until you get in there. It's like, wow, that guy, he's a maniac. He's like a beautiful maniac to watch. Like it's like the fate of his freedom or something is at stake. It's like something he has to win or else, it's like nothing you've seen. Final thing then, Gil. Young fighters out there, you've been around this game for a long time, champion. Give us some of your top tips for young fighters out there to, who are starting out and they want to work their way up. What's the best advice you can give these young fighters? Young athletes.
Don't procrastinate. Don't procrastinate. Don't leave anything for tomorrow. Work hard. Be dedicated. Stay away from the streets, the drugs, the parties. I've told my guys this. Listen, you wanna do drugs, you wanna party, you wanna stay out all night. Go learn how to play a guitar, a drum set. Go be a rock star. Then you can live that life. But if this is what you want to do, then you can't do any of that stuff. You have to live, eat, sleep the life of a fighter. And discipline, you got to be very disciplined, because there's a lot of guys out there that are hungry, and if you're not ready, anything can happen in that fight.
Gil, do you let a lot of the young athletes you work with, are some of them free? Do they have enough money to pay? Do you have athletes you let train for free?
Most of the kids that I train don't have the means to, so I don't charge them. It reminds me of me when I was a kid. I didn't have much. I had to shovel snow, chop wood, clean backyards, whatever, just to get money because I had to pitch in for gas because we didn't have a gym close to us. So it was probably like a 45-minute drive. And then on top of that, pay your gym dues. And then on top of that, you got to pay your coach. And I see it as long as they show me dedication, I'm okay with them coming in and not having to pay. Oh, and by the way, the kid that I was talking about, his name is Brandon Moreno. He just fought.
The kid who just fought. Oh, wow, that kid. Yeah, he fought incredible. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. He really made.
Figueiredo. Yeah, that was a fight, man. Dana was giving him props afterwards.
Yeah, he fought Figueroa or whatever. And that guy Figueroa has been just scorching dudes. He's been just running people over. And so Moreno really rose up there and surprised a lot of people. Gil, can we get something from you? We want to acknowledge the Spanish, the Spanish fans, those future Spanish viewers. Can we get something about, this is Gil Martinez, welcome, bienvenido, whatever, Everyman BJJ, follow, whatever you want to say about us in Spanish.
Quiero agradecerles a todos por estar con nosotros este día. Muy agradecido con Frank y su compañero. Y muchísimas gracias por haberme invitado aquí a este programa. Espero que les haya gustado y espero regresar muy pronto otra vez.
Thank you, Gil. And how do people out there who might have been, who might relate to your story, how can they contact you? And you got a gym in Vegas too, right? By the way, really quick, Mob Boxing. Why the name Mob Boxing?
Well, we live in Vegas. It's a little kind of throwback to how this town was raised or how it came up. It's a little kind of, bad boyish kind of, but I think it fits, I think it fits for fighting and it fits for Vegas. So that's why the name Mob, M-O-B, Box.
Yeah. And how do people get in contact with you out there, Gil?
They can, message me on my social media, Instagram, Master Mitter, Twitter, or my Facebook, Gil Martinez. They can reach out to me on any of those platforms.
Really quick, I got one more question because I forgot. Master Mitter. What's one thing people out there? Because everybody's punching. People on Instagram now, everybody's cardio kickboxing and shadow boxing, a lot of bad form. What's your top tips, 1 minute or less, like somebody hitting mitts, punching the bag? What are the common mistakes and what should they be doing?
Personal opinion. When people are holding mitts, if they're holding them like this, it's not good for the athlete because you don't have two targets, you have one, and you have to try and mimic a fight when you're holding mitts. If you're just calling 1-2s and not throwing anything back at them, when they do step into that ring and somebody is throwing something back at them, they're not going to necessarily learn or know how to react to that. So you got to make that training session, that mitt session, when you're holding the mitts with people, you got to make it as close as possible to an actual fight.
Great advice. Great insights. Gil Martinez, Noah Green, happy Sunday. My Ravens are in the playoffs. I'm a happy man. Gil, we're going to have you on again. Happy 2021 to you. I'll see you sometime again in Vegas. We'll do another podcast. Happy 2021 to you, my friend. You too, Noah.
Thank you very much. Happy New Year to you guys.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, Gil, for joining us today on Everyman BJJ podcast. We're here typically on Sundays, 1:30 Pacific and 4:30 Eastern. And you can find us on social media at Everyman BJJ. all across the networks. All right, take care. We're out.
Thank you, Noah.
Bye, guys.
Thank